Good afternoon and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to address something I know we all go through. Some of us are in different places than other people are. There's a lot of different people on the path. You're just figuring out what narcissism is. You're somewhere in the range where you've figured out what it is, but you're still coping with what you went through. And there's people at the end who have healed as well as you can heal from a narcissistic relationship, and are basically putting the narcissist in the past. They're now basically a speck in your history, and everywhere in between. And so, but one of the things that we struggle with, and I think everybody does to some degree, is blaming ourselves. Was it our fault? Why did this have to happen? And I want to tell you distinctly in this video why you should never, and I repeat, never blame yourself for the narcissist. Unless. There is an unless in there, and I'm going to hit that at the end, so stick around. Because there's one scenario where you should blame yourself for the narcissist. The rest of the time, no. So let's start from the beginning. I've heard a lot of influencers say, people who talk about narcissistic abuse, there's a lot of good people who do it. I listen to a number of them myself, and they've helped me tremendously. So it's not everybody, but some influencers want to tell you in a roundabout way that the narcissistic relationship was actually your fault. It was actually your fault that it happened at all. Well, how do they say this stuff? They'll present it in different ways. Well, the narcissistic relationship only happened because you just weren't in the right place in your life. If you just been in a better place in your life, it wouldn't have happened. Or they'll say, well, when the narcissist came, you were just so vulnerable. Maybe you just came out of a divorce. Maybe you came out of an illness. You were down on your luck. You were just so incredibly vulnerable that narcissist was able to sink their teeth into you. They'll say, well, you were a people pleaser. You were just too eager to please people. If you hadn't been in that situation, you hadn't had that mentality, the narcissistic relationship wouldn't have happened. Or they'll say, well, it's your boundaries, or lack thereof. Didn't have the right boundaries. If you'd had the right boundaries in place, the narcissist couldn't have come, and they couldn't have ensnared you. Drop comments if you've heard things like this. I want to say, not all of this is inaccurate. Yes, oftentimes we would have seen the narcissist coming if we had been in a better place, if we hadn't been vulnerable, if we had stronger boundaries and those sorts of things, sure. Here's the problem, and here's what they're missing. The only way you are in that place in your life where you're impervious to the narcissist is if you've been through the narcissistic relationship and you have discovered who they are, what they do, what the red flags are, how you prevent someone from entering your life, what things you do and won't accept, you will and won't accept, what boundaries you need to have, how much appreciation and value you need to see in yourself. Do you see the problem? They're creating a chicken or the egg oftentimes, and I don't think they're doing this intentionally. I don't think it's malicious. And they're right in some cases to say you were in a vulnerable place in whatever way that is, and that's why the narcissist was successful with you. But what they're missing is you can't be in a place where you're impervious to them unless you have already been through the relationship. So in other words, they're expecting that you should have been in a place in your life that you can't, in principle, be before you get to another level. It's like, well, in order to see the narcissist coming, you have to know what narcissism is, and you have to know your boundaries and all that. But the reason why it happened is because you didn't know your boundaries, and you didn't know what narcissism was and all that. It's circular. So the blame ultimately gets put on us at times by certain people. But I want to tell you something. Not only is it a problem because the only way you can know what a narcissist is and know your boundaries and all of these things, what your value level is if you've been through it. So you can't know all that prior to meeting the narcissist, yet the only way you could have sniffed out the narcissist is if you know those things already. So that's a problem. I might mention that a couple more times because that's a big, big problem. The other issue with it is, even if you had entered a relationship with another person at that point where you were, with exactly the same boundaries, exactly the same understanding of your value, exactly the same knowledge of red flags, of toxic behavior, you had the same exact vulnerabilities. Maybe you had just come out of a divorce. Maybe you were very lonely. Maybe you were financially in trouble. Maybe whatever it was, okay? Or some combination. If you had taken all of that, but instead of meeting a narcissist, you met a good, loving, faithful, God-fearing, especially, person, how do you think that relationship would have gone? That is a very important question to ask yourself. Because I'm going to say that unless you had some really serious problems you had to work through, and maybe you did, okay? Maybe you were in a place where you weren't fit for anybody, but you still wanted somebody. So in other words, maybe if you were a codependent, and a narcissist makes you a codependent, makes you reliant upon them for your life. You can't live without being with someone. If you were in a place then or now even where you cannot be alone, you cannot do it. You've got to have someone in your life. Guys, I'm telling you, this is tough love, but that is a problem. If you were in that situation before you met the narcissist, then maybe it wouldn't have mattered who you met. Because nobody wants to be with a codependent who cannot be alone and is so needy on other people and their validation. That is as bad in some cases as being a narcissist, as far as living with them. They may not be as abusive and cruel and those sorts of things, but it's difficult to deal with someone who needs all your time, all your attention, all your everything, and cannot be without you, and cannot be alone. It's a bad place to be, guys. It really is. If you were not a codependent, though, and you just had your basic human issues, a little vulnerable, a little lonely, a little, maybe even a little bit desperate, maybe you've been through, like I said, divorce or hardship, if you had met a good person, someone like yourself who maybe still had some vulnerabilities, we're all human, that relationship probably, and I mean probably, would have really soared and done well. You probably would have gotten along. There wouldn't have been the toxicity. There wouldn't have been probably constant bickering and arguing. There would have been someone who returned and was reciprocal with your love and attention and validation and admiration and your faithfulness. They weren't cheating on you. They weren't triangulating you. You weren't doing that to them. The relationship may not have been 50-50, but it would have been, close, somewhat close. I don't think any relationship is 100% even or always 50-50. But a good, even decent relationship is going to hover around there, okay? Someone's going to be a little bit more in control. Someone's going to be a little bit more needy, a little bit more probably in love with the other person, but not a lot, not night and day. Because the narcissist, you're up here as far as your love, your validation, your admiration, your love, empathy. I think I said love twice, but you get my point. And they're down here. They reciprocate nothing after the love bomb unless they're breadcrumbing you and want you to stay in the relationship or they need something out of you. A normal relationship is more like this. It's closer. So that's what you would have had. If you'd entered the relationship that instead of with the narcissist, when you did, with whatever vulnerabilities and problems you had, and you met a good person, it would have looked more like this. You guys would have held hands and gone to get an ice cream and had good conversations, at least at times, and maybe you don't have that super deep, rich connection that would lead you to marriage and things like that. Maybe it's not that kind of person, but it probably would have been at least a pretty good relationship. Somewhere between decent to stellar. Somewhere, right? But you entered it with a narcissist instead. So what does that prove? It proves that it wasn't your fault. Yeah, you probably had some things to work on. All of us have things to work on. We're always going to be a work in progress. don't beat yourself up too hard about that. But if you've identified, I need to work on this, I need to improve myself, I need to whatever, do it. Always, always, always be improving yourself, even if you have a wonderful person in your life at some point. Still improve yourself for them, as they should be improving themselves for you, always. That said, it wasn't your fault. And the whole idea that, well, you didn't have the right boundaries, and you were too vulnerable, and you were too needy at the time, and, well, the narcissist could never have done what they did if you hadn't been in just such a terrible place in your life. It's true and it's not true. Like I said, because it misses the point that you can't know what you need to know about narcissists and what to expect if you've never encountered it. You can't have that knowledge before you get the knowledge. That's the biggest problem. And the second problem is, which is pretty big, is that it wasn't your fault, and we know it, it's provable, because if you'd entered that relationship in the same state with a good person, it would have worked. It would have worked pretty well. But let me add this. Even if that relationship, say it was with a good person, maybe you broke up. Maybe you dated for 6 months, a year and a half, longer, whatever, and at some point it just wasn't working. You didn't have a deep enough connection. Some part of it, maybe it was distance. You lived too far away and it just couldn't work. Maybe the person had to move. Maybe you just didn't have that crazy attraction to them that you'd like for someone to spend your life with. All these things are fair. But guess what would not have happened? You would not have had a relationship blow up like a nuke was dropped on it. If that relationship didn't work, then you guys would have parted ways amicably. At least, maybe there have been some tears, some hardship, some trouble a little bit, but you would not have been lying in bed for 3 months not knowing if you can get up. You wouldn't have been trauma bonded to somebody before you even knew what a trauma bond was. You wouldn't have been aching and pining, feeling like a lovesick puppy. You can't walk, you can't move, you can't even breathe without this person. That's not natural. That is a spiritual issue right there. That's a spiritual problem. That wouldn't have happened with a decent person. So we can talk all we want about how we should have been in a better place, should have known your boundaries, should have known your worth, should have. But what that ultimately does is it puts the blame back on the victim. Because even though there's some truth to that, like I've said, there can be some truth to those things. The ultimate truth is the relationship was what it was because you were with a rotten, no-good scoundrel called a narcissist. Guys, that's why it didn't work. If it had been with even a relatively decent person, it would have been so much different. And you guys who have found by now someone who is like you, who reciprocates love, affection, attention, if you found that, then A, I'm so happy for you. If you haven't found it, you will. I believe that. If it's God's will for your life, and you want that, it will come. But 3, it wasn't your fault. Please understand that. So don't sit back and blame yourself and say, man, if I wasn't so lonely, this wouldn't have happened to me. The narcissist only worked. That you entered a relationship with a monster, a nightmare. You didn't know who they were. You didn't know what they were. How could you have known before entering that somebody was going to come into your life and tell you that you are the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the greatest thing they've ever seen, and mimic you, and shoot back and mirror back at you the things that you love, and talk about the future, a future you could only have dreamed of, where you're pinching yourself for the first few months, and you're saying, man, I didn't think this kind of love existed. I thought this was like movie stuff. I mean, we just get along so effortlessly. They're there for me. They're loving. They're giving. They just want the same things I want. They just wanted somebody to, and man, it's working. This works. That's what we thought. That's what was presented. But we didn't know that someone could come and so perfectly present all of that stuff and be so manipulative and devious that was part of a greater plan to entangle you for the purpose of abusing you and seeing how far you can take them in their lives. That is the problem. The problem is not where we were. The problem is we encountered an awful, no good, rotten person. A person sent straight from Satan, a person specially designed, wound up like a toy and sent into your life so that you'd hold it and you treasure it and you think, man, this is the most beautiful thing I have ever. Did you guys know that? I didn't. And I want to tell you, I did not look at the world with rose-colored glasses and have this completely absurd fantasy worldview where everybody had the same interest that I did, and everybody was out for my best interest. Everybody was going to support me. Everyone was kind and loving and generous and just wanted life like I did. I didn't think that because I have a biblical worldview. The world is corrupt. The world is fallen. This world is run by the god of this world, Satan, or the ruler of this world, as Jesus called him. This world is full of weeds, as Jesus points out in his parable of the weeds in Matthew 13. This world, I didn't think that about the world. But what I didn't know, guys, is the same thing you guys probably didn't know. That there are people on this planet who are basically satanic wind-up toys who come in and fake everything that you want to see in a relationship so that they can later destroy you. Who can lie on demand. Who actually lie like they're breathing. Who can't tell the truth. Who want nothing more than to wrap around you like a python and squeeze you slowly to death until there's nothing left so they can just move on like nothing ever happened. You didn't know people could be that callous, that mean, that they were intentionally trying to enter relationships for the purpose of destroying them. Guys, that is the problem. This is why you should never blame yourself for the narcissist. If you want to come down on yourself because maybe you do have things you have to work on, like I said, by all means, work on those things. Always. You're a work in progress like I am. We should be progressing our entire lives on an upward trajectory, to me, becoming more like Christ and less like Adam. That is how we know we're improving. It's how we also know we're saved, actually, if you ask me. If we're becoming more like Christ throughout the course of our lives and less like fallen, corrupted Adam. But that is the trajectory we should be on. You got things to work on in your life? Absolutely. Keep doing it. But don't think, well, if only I'd been here instead of here, the narcissist couldn't have happened. Man, I should have been here. I should have known better. I should have better boundaries and da-da-da-da-da. That is the wrong way to view this thing because you were dealing with a monster and you can't know what you don't know. So I'm not going to continue to beat on those 2 points. I think that they're clear. At least I hope that they are. You should never, ever blame yourself for the narcissist because you should have been in a better place or had better boundaries or been less vulnerable or been less lonely. That's not your fault. The main point is it's their fault. It's always the narcissist's fault at the end of the day because they're the manipulative, lying, cheating scoundrels, I keep calling them. That's who they are. They did this. Did you want the relationship to go poorly? No. Did you do behaviors and act in ways that should have made the relationship fail? No. Were you giving to a fault? Yes. Were they reciprocating and doing any of this? No. Because the narcissist never wanted the relationship to work. That's the dirty little secret. They don't enter a relationship wanting it to work. They enter it wanting to get what they can get and blow you up. And they know they're going to do it. Even if you're married to them for 30 years or 15 years or whatever it is, their intentions are not what your intentions are. They don't want a kind, loving, reciprocal, lasting, working, functional relationship. They don't want it, they never wanted it, and they never will want it. I'll slow down. But don't blame yourself, and I mean it. Give yourself a break. Correct the things that you need to correct. Correct those things that would keep other toxic people from entering. But now that you know it, now that you know who they are, don't blame yourself. But I told you at the beginning, there's one instance where you should absolutely blame yourself. And I'm not talking about a little bit. I mean 100%. Never ever blame yourself for the narcissist unless you actually have the wisdom of what narcissism is, and you have introspected, you've healed, you've figured out who they are and what they do. You know their patterns. You've watched a bunch of my videos, maybe other videos. You've thought about this yourself for a long time, which I'm sure you have. You've gotten an understanding that who you are with is nothing short of a demonic nightmare of a person. If all of that is true, and you still let the narcissist come back into your life and hoover you, or you let another narcissist come waltzing right in with the same tricks and the same game plan that you went through and you learned from, and you did not spot the red flags now, and you did not have the boundaries in place now, and you weren't in a place where you understood your value better, if you now, with all of that said, going through it, healing, processing, and figuring them out, if you are still going to allow that narcissist or any of them to enter your life and do it all over again, or probably worse, that is on you. And that would be on me. See, once you get the knowledge, you can't go back. It's like salvation. Author of Hebrews talks about this. Once you've tasted the heavenly gift, once you are walking in salvation, you know what it is to know the Lord. Oh boy, you better not go back, because there's no return. It's similar to that with the narcissist. Once you understand everything about what they are, and you've gotten the knowledge, the wisdom, you've healed, you've broken that darned, God-forsaken trauma bond, which is just murder for everybody. But you've done all of that, and you're in the best place you've ever been. To let one of those narcissists back into your life, you deserve everything that happens. And I know that's tough. That's tough to hear, but it's true. Because you've tasted the heavenly gift of knowing what narcissism is, being healed from it, having the wisdom, being able to spot toxicity from a mile away. All the boundaries are now in place, at least most of them. The red flags, you know what they are. And you're still going to let that narcissist or someone else, some other one, come and play the playbook on them, on you? Because they all have the same playbook. If you're going to let them come and run that playbook with their little tweaks and variations that makes them unique, guys, there's no excuse. That's your fault. And mine. Don't do it. We're all better than that. We're never going to do that, are we? Never. So, anyway, I want to be clear about two things. Don't mistake my last part of the message for covering over the first or somehow jeopardizing what I said. Never blame yourself for the narcissist. You didn't know what you were dealing with. You could not have known what you were dealing with. You could not have had everything in place unless you experienced this. They are the ones with malicious intent. They were the ones who came to destroy. We didn't realize those things were here. And if you'd entered a good relationship with a healthy person, it would have soared. At minimum, it would have fizzled out and it would have been, okay, didn't work out. We tried it. Good luck to you. Instead, you enter a relationship with a malicious, slandering, nasty, filthy individual called a narcissist. Don't blame yourself, ever. Don't blame yourself, please. But now that you know, don't ever enter in this again, because then you will have to blame yourself. Then you cannot cry to anyone, including yourself, or even to God at that point and say, I know I knew everything, but oh, I did it again. I let another one of these people. Can't do it. You can't do it. But the beautiful part is, once you understand these people, that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're not going to allow it to ever occur again. So I hope this is good for somebody. I have talked to a few people dealing with similar things like this, so I hope this is helpful for you. But anyway, drop comments below. I so appreciate everybody who's now commenting. I've had a ton of people recently, which is just awesome. I'm really I'm flattered by some of the things you guys have said. And I'll continue to do the best work I can do. Drop comments, share your experiences. If you have things you want me to talk about specifically, I will try to work those in. But anyway, thank you so much. I hope this is helpful for you. And until next time, you know what I'm going to say. God bless.